gonna lie, this was a really tough reading week for me. Hi guys, it's Steph here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to do my weekly wrap up for the week of, oh god, I've forgotten already. June the 4th to June the 10th, because how could I forget the dates in one single week? Now I'm going to apologise for my voice because I was out at a girlfriend's 30th last night and so I have lost my voice. And I've got to film 3 or 4 videos today, so this is going to go really well. This week I read 5 books, one of which I can't show you in this video, but I will be having a separate book review video come out on the release date of the book because it was sent to me for review. It's a picture book and I'm just can't wait to share it with you guys. It's absolutely gorgeous. I read 5 books. I'm sharing 4 with you today. I read a total of 1,240 pages and my yearly total for books is 116, which I'm super thrilled about. But yeah, this week was hard with the reading. Very hard. And you're going to see why in just a minute. The first book that I read this week was Carla Marc, and this probably didn't set the tone for the week. What can I say? When this released, there were a lot of problems, and I'm not going to go too much into the problems because so many people have talked about it, and if you do a search or whatever, you'll be able to find all of the really problematic elements that are in this book listed and discussed by people far more eloquent than I am. The biggest problem with this book is the seemingly acceptable use of a dark-skinned antagonist or savage figure in young adult fiction, and I mean, that's not acceptable anymore because, you know, it's just not. I mean, that was one of the issues in here and I knew that going into it, so I knew what I was looking for and I was actually looking past that. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is by Veronica Roth. It is her science fiction novel that was released last year. I was reading this for the Emojiathon, and it is about 2 warring groups of people living on an outpost planet. Why are they warring? Because they are, and because they can. And so there's sort of this element of, it's almost like a Romeo and Juliet type thing where you've got one person from one and one from the other and that sort of thing, which would be fine, except aside from the representation being massively off in this book, the pacing was also massively off in this book. It was so hard to get into. There was just things that were being described that were unnecessary, and there were things that were taking forever to get there, and then when you got there it raced through it and it was just bizarre. A pretty regular comment about Veronica Roth's multiple point of view books, because this is multiple point of view, is they all sound the same, and they did. Sarah and Akos, the 2 main characters, they sounded the same. Sometimes the characterization was off. A lot of characters changed their opinion or perspective or their behavior so quickly. It was bizarre. I mean, the biggest one was the turnaround of Akos's mother, who is in the first part of the book and then in the last part of the book. And who we meet in the first part of the book is completely different to who we meet at the end of the book. And I had trouble wrapping my head around that, unfortunately. While I think the book was an interesting concept, it really, and excuse the terrible pun here, it really missed the mark, because I don't know what Veronica Roth was trying to achieve with this book. Ultimately, I haven't given this a rating because I don't think that I can. Look, I'm glad that I read it and I can form my own opinion on it, because I don't like not reading a book purely because other people say don't read it, it's terrible. I had a copy of it. Rather than let it go to waste, I want to make, you know, form my own opinion. And the really frustrating thing about this has the most beautiful cover. Aesthetically speaking, I'm going to be very shallow here. It is absolutely gorgeous, and it just, oh, it makes me sad when you have something this beautiful executed so poorly. I'm happy to say that the next book that I read was probably one of my favourite reads of this week, and it was Still Life with Tornado by A.S. King. And I was reading this because I was going to meet A.S. King on Friday night, and I did, and she was absolutely lovely and hilarious. And oh, after listening to Amy speak about her book, I can now appreciate it so much more. I mean, I loved it, and there were so many things in it that I connected with, so many things that reminded me of people that I know. It is the story of 16-year-old Sarah, who is having an existential crisis, decides to stop going to school because she recognises that nothing is an original idea and it just blows her mind, and so she stops going to school, and eventually she begins to run into past and futures of herself. So she meets her 10-year-old self, her 23-year-old self, and her 40-year-old self, and together they help her identify what is at the heart of the issue for her, because there are a few things going on in the background that we slowly begin to piece together, things that are really contributing to the state that she's found herself in. And the one thing that I really loved about this was how A.S. King writes smart teenagers and doesn't speak down to them, and that she clearly has a lot of respect for them, and that came out when she was talking on Friday night. She has a lot of respect and a lot of time for teenagers and the things that they go through, because it's really tough. Teenage years are really tough, and adults, we tend to dismiss kids, and I know I've been guilty of it as well, and I try not to be. I try to be really conscious of it. There's a line in the book that I highlighted, and it's 3 words, and it says kids are smart, and they are. I mean, I work with really little kids, but teenagers, little kids, they're all really smart, and if we don't give them enough credit for what they know and what they see and what they feel, and we tend to brush things off. So this is really powerful. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. She did sign it for me, and I absolutely love that. If you like your young adult contemporary books with a little bit of surrealism, or I don't know, maybe it's even magical realism because you're running into past and present futures of yourself, highly check this out. But do be warned, there are some trigger warnings for domestic abuse, so beware of that going into it. Ultimately, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I did pick up a second A.S. King book to read because I just fell in love with her writing style. The next book I read was also for my Emojiathon TBR, and this one hurt my brain so badly. Oh my gosh. And that was Embassy Town by China Mieville. Mieville? Why can't I ever say this name properly? What can I say about this book? Because I don't know if I actually understand it. I think I spoke to a couple of people while I was reading it going, I don't think I'm smart enough to read this. And I still think that, which is not a negative thing on me. I just think it is a really well done book, but I think it takes a certain mind to get into it, and perhaps I was not ready to read it when I did. I did like it though, and I'm glad that I read it, and by the time I got to the last third of the book, I was able to follow the story a little bit more because it was quite fast-paced and action-driven. Essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, there are a colony of humans living on a outpost planet in the far future, and they live on this planet at the discretion of the native inhabitants, who they call the host. Our main character, Avis, had previously managed to leave the planet, and she gets married, and her husband is very curious about how the hosts communicate, because they communicate through a very complicated means, and the humans on this outpost have had to uncover a way of communicating the language with them, and that's language with a capital L, that's what they speak. And her husband is really intrigued by this culture and this language. So they return there after she's left, and she's essentially escaped, and she goes back and then becomes embroiled in all of the politics of being back. There's a whole lot of political intrigue in this. There is a political maneuver that ultimately ends up in the hosts having a very strange reaction to the newest ambassador to them, and from there everything becomes just a little bit more desperate, a little bit more action-based, and I can't really say more without giving it away because you sort of need to talk through it and explain it. I'll leave a link to it down below so you can definitely check out the description and see for yourself. I mean, this was really well written, and there is a lot of discussion about language as a form of communication, and I love that. I mean, that's the stuff that I live for, although sometimes it goes over my head. What I really did love, there was a very diverse range of people and relationships in here. Ultimately, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think I'm going to need to do a reread of this at some point, possibly when I'm not so tired, because it does require a lot of brain power, which is good, but it requires a lot of brain power. The last book that I read this week that I'm going to talk to you about is The Naming of Tishkin Silk by Glenda Millard, which is a little middle grade book that I borrowed from my works library, and this was just beautiful. It is just beautiful, and I'm going to read you the blurb. This sums up the story really well. Griffin Silk has a secret in his heart that nobody else knows until he meets Layla, a princess with a daisy chain crown, and he shares his inner thoughts with her. Together they find a way to deal with Griffin's secret. Just like the mythical beast whose name he bears, Griffin has uncommon courage and the heart of a lion. Glenda Millard writes absolutely beautiful children's books, but I'd only read her picture books before, and my school's librarian came up to me and said, Steph, you have to read these. So I've got this book and I've got the second book, which is about Layla, and I'm hoping to read that this weekend. This, oh my goodness, I have no words. It is sad, but it's beautiful, and it is so full of hope that only young children can have. So in the face of, you know, this terrible secret that he keeps inside of himself, Griffin is able to find the courage to move on and to become, you know, a stronger person for it through his newfound friendship and his wonderful family. His family is incredible. Griffin has 5 older sisters and they're called the Rainbow Girls, and they're also just so adorable. And his grandmother Nell is amazing. She dresses up as a fairy godmother and treats Griffin and Layla to an afternoon tea where she is the fairy godmother and she treats them like a prince and a princess, and it's just beautiful. This is a series of books that I'm pretty sure I'm going to go out and buy the entire series of, because I fell in love with it. So thank you to my school's librarian for recommending this to me. So that's everything that I read this week. That's pretty good considering this was a bust and this was really hard for me to read. It took me a long time to read it. I'm so glad that I read Still Life with Tornado and The Naming of Tishkin Silk. Those just made my week. Yeah, if nothing else, I highly recommend those two. Pick them up. They are so worth it. Next week I am continuing on with my Emojiathon TBR, which is currently sitting in here. There's a lot of books. I've got to try and get to them. I think I'm going to start with Starflight. Let me know in the comments, what have you been reading this week? How are you feeling about it? Let me know down below. I love to have the conversations with you guys. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.